You have been told a story about what makes you real. Maybe you absorbed it from teachers, from job postings, from the silent glances exchanged in conference rooms. Maybe you felt it the first time you watched someone with the right pedigree walk into a room and command instant deference, while you, despite your results, felt invisible. This story is everywhere. That expertise is conferred, not earned. That legitimacy is a certificate, not a consequence. That your value is only as strong as the institution willing to stamp your forehead. This book is a declaration of war on that story. I wrote Credentials Are Dead because I watched too many brilliant, self-directed people shrink themselves to fit a system built for a different era. I watched them apologize for their backgrounds, underprice their work, and hesitate to claim opportunities they were already qualified to seize. I watched them accumulate knowledge in private but hesitate to turn it into leverage in public. I watched them wait for a permission slip that never arrives. If you have ever felt like a trespasser in your own career, this book is your permission slip. If you have ever discounted your hard-won skills because they were earned in the wild rather than the classroom, this book is your proof. If you have ever hesitated to speak up, pitch, or lead because you lacked the right label, this book is your roadmap out of the legitimacy trap. Inside, you will find a sequence of moves: how to diagnose the invisible beliefs that keep you playing small, how to see the credential machine for what it is, a risk filter, not a measure of genius, how to reframe your identity from self-taught to self-directed, and build a public stack of proof that no gatekeeper can ignore. You will learn to signal your value with clarity, to anchor your confidence in evidence rather than approval, and to build a compounding flywheel of reputation, opportunity, and self-respect. This is not a call to bitterness or rebellion for its own sake. It is a call to build. The world is changing faster than any institution can credential. The market rewards those who solve problems, not those who wait for permission. Your ability to learn, adapt, and produce visible outcomes is now the ultimate competitive advantage. The old gatekeepers are still guarding doors, but the walls are crumbling. The only question is whether you will keep waiting for someone to let you in or start building your own arena. You do not need another certificate to be dangerous. You do not need another degree to be valuable. You do not need anyone's blessing to own your expertise. The only thing you need is the willingness to stop apologizing for your path and start proving your value over and over in public until the market can no longer ignore you. This book is your blueprint. The rest is up to you. Chapter 1, The Lie. Everything you believe about what makes you qualified is a hallucination. You sit in high-stakes meetings, you solve complex problems, you do the heavy lifting, and yet a quiet voice in the back of your mind insists you are trespassing. You look at the people around you, you see their titles, you see the names of the prestigious institutions attached to their profiles, and in a fraction of a second, your self-trust collapses. You shrink, you downplay your insights. You overexplain your background as if apologizing for the path you took. This chapter will show you exactly why you do this, and more importantly, how to rip that mental script to shreds. By the time you reach the end of this section, you will understand the exact mechanism that keeps smart people playing below their actual level, and you will see the precise path to reclaiming your authority. The invisible cage of permission. The real problem destroying your momentum is not a lack of intelligence. It is not a lack of effort. It is certainly not a lack of potential. You already study hard, you think deeply, you solve real problems every single day in the trenches of your industry. The pain only arrives when formal credentials enter the conversation. That is the exact moment your private competence splits from your public hesitation. You suffer from a specific mental virus called the legitimacy trap. The legitimacy trap is the learned belief that your knowledge only counts if an institution approves it. It is a conditioned reflex, not an objective fact. It survives and thrives even when you have a mountain of clear proof that your skills work in the real world. You judge what you know based on the container it came in rather than the content itself. If you learned a framework by solving a brutal problem under pressure, you discount it. If someone else learned that exact same framework in a prestigious lecture hall, you elevate them. You are judging the water by the shape of the glass. This is the container versus content error, and it is quietly ruining your career. This error forces you into bizarre, self-destructive everyday behaviors. You physically shrink when asked where you studied. You delay launching your project, pitching your service, or asking for the promotion because you believe one more certificate will finally make you real. You hand over your power to people who have done half the work but carry twice the audacity. This is far more dangerous than ordinary insecurity. Ordinary insecurity asks whether you have the ability to do the work. Legitimacy insecurity asks whether your ability is even allowed to matter. It questions your right to exist in the room. This means even your biggest successes feel emotionally unstable because you still believe you bypassed the official gatekeepers. You feel like a fugitive from the credential police, waiting for the day someone taps you on the shoulder and asks you to leave. The central contrast of this entire philosophy comes down to one brutal distinction. Losers ask whether they have the right label. Winners ask whether they can solve the problem. The market is not perfectly fair, but it ruthlessly rewards visible value over invisible resentment. But before we can build that visible value, we have to look at the massive damage this trap is causing in your life right now. The high cost of playing small. If you do not dismantle this belief immediately, you will keep learning without ever converting your learning into leverage. You will buy more books, and you will enroll in more courses, and you will take more notes, but you will never take ownership. You will build a massive private library and a shrinking public presence. You will develop a stronger mind and a weaker voice. You will become a genius in the shadows, entirely useless to a world that desperately needs your solutions. You will remain entirely vulnerable to prestige pressure. One fancy title on someone else's profile will be enough to shake your confidence for an entire week. You will keep treating labels as final verdicts on human worth instead of treating them as simple market signals. You will keep assuming that confidence belongs exclusively to the credentialed, leaving you standing on the sidelines waiting for a permission slip that is never going to arrive. This leads to a brutal reality. You will underperform relative to your actual skill. You will refuse opportunities you are entirely capable of handling. You will price your services too low. You will pitch your ideas too timidly. You will stay invisible for years. And the most agonizing part is that less skilled but better signaled people will pass you again and again. They will take the promotions, the clients, the money, and the respect that should have been yours, simply because they did not apologize for their existence. The ultimate long-term cost is identity damage. Repeated hesitation hardens into a self-concept. Your self-concept dictates your behavior. Your behavior dictates your outcomes. And those poor outcomes then appear to prove your false belief that you were never good enough in the first place. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy of mediocrity. You act like a fraud, you get treated like a subordinate, and you accept it as your destiny. But this cycle can be broken, and the reversal is spectacular. The upward spiral of ownership. When you finally shatter the legitimacy trap, the compounding returns are staggering. The first thing you experience is compounding self-respect. You begin trusting your own evidence more than other people's status cues. You completely stop apologizing for the unconventional path you took. Your identity violently shifts from a permission seeker to a self-directed operator. You stop asking for a seat at the table and start building your own table. That internal shift creates compounding credibility. Proof builds your reputation. Your reputation builds your access to better rooms. That access allows you to build even more proof, creating a relentless upward loop of authority. You experience compounding career gains. You position yourself better for roles, clients, and partnerships. You negotiate with a cold, clear confidence. You walk into rooms that once felt permanently closed to you, and you hold your ground because you know exactly what you bring to the fight. Most importantly, you achieve compounding emotional freedom. The panic you used to feel when credentials appeared vanishes. The envy you felt toward prestigious people evaporates. You operate with more calm, more focus, and more clean execution under pressure. You no longer waste mental energy defending your background. You spend all your energy executing the mission. The first time you apply the principles in this book, you will achieve a permanent shift in perspective. You will name the belief that has been weakening your authority. You will stop confusing emotional discomfort with a lack of qualification. You will build a mental framework that replaces borrowed legitimacy with owned legitimacy. You will begin speaking about your expertise without shrinking. You will describe your path as self-directed rather than deficient. You will state what you know in cleaner, stronger language, stripping away every reflexive disclaimer and status apology. You will also create your first layer of practical movement right now. Identify one area where you already have undeniable evidence of your skill. Think of a problem you solved, a project you delivered, or a system you built. Now identify one area where you need more visible proof. Finally, identify one signal you can improve immediately to make your competence obvious to a stranger. This is how you begin. But to master this transformation, you must understand the exact sequence of the system. The roadmap to unshakable authority. Escaping the trap requires a precise sequence of moves. Step 1 is diagnosing the false belief. You must notice when your self-trust drops. Identify the trigger and separate your emotional reaction from the objective facts. Diagnosis must come first because you cannot defeat an unnamed enemy. Vague suffering leads to vague solutions, but clear naming creates emotional leverage. You have to catch the lie the second it enters your mind. We will dissect the anatomy of this lie when we explore false fraud. Step 2 involves understanding the system that installed this virus. You must see how your early environments trained you into approval dependency. You must understand that the preferences of the system are not moral truths. System awareness must come second, because if you blame yourself for a structural pattern, you will fight the wrong battle. Understanding the machine weakens its psychological grip and completely removes your shame. You stop taking rejection personally when you understand how the game is rigged. Step 3 is rebuilding your identity around ownership. You must shift from viewing yourself as a lesser substitute to viewing yourself as a self-directed agent. You must choose language that reflects responsibility and initiative. Identity must come before aggressive visibility, because if your inner language is weak, your external message will wobble. People feel hesitation even when you say the right words. We will forge this new posture when we tackle the identity shift. Step 4 is creating proof. You must turn your skill into visible work, turn that work into outcomes, and turn those outcomes into evidence others can inspect. Proof must come before polished positioning, because signals without substance are fragile. Visible evidence turns abstract self-belief into undeniable reality. You cannot talk your way into permanent authority. You have to build it. This is the core engine of proof first. Step 5 is signaling clearly. You must package your competence in a way the market can read instantly. You must use trust signals, positioning, and referrals intelligently to reduce ambiguity. The market is too busy to dig for your hidden genius. You have to serve it to them on a silver platter. We will master this translation of value during Signal Smart. Step 6 is building internal authority. You must learn to trust your repeated evidence, challenge old scripts when they activate, and stop outsourcing your worth to institutions. Internal authority must anchor the whole process, because without inner stability, every prestige cue can reset your confidence. The goal is not one good week. The goal is long-term self-command. We will lock this in when we explore inner authority. Step 7 is compounding the results. You repeat the cycle. You improve the quality of your proof and signals over time. You let your earned authority become your permanent identity. You adapt and accelerate, leveraging the strategies of future proof to ensure you never fall behind in a world that changes faster every single day. You stop playing defense and start running up the score. We will bring all of this together in earned authority. The great divide between builders and beggars. The difference between people who win in this new economy and people who lose comes down to their fundamental attitude toward permission. Winners build while losers wait. Winners create proof long before they feel fully ready. Losers wait for a permission slip that rarely comes. Winners understand that motion creates clarity, while losers believe that clarity must magically arrive before they can take a single step. Winners respect credentials, but losers worship them. Winners see a degree or a title as one signal among many. It is a piece of data, nothing more. Losers treat credentials like sacred evidence of human worth. Winners stay pragmatic, calculating, and focused on the work. Losers become bitter, resentful, and obsessed with the unfairness of the game. They complain about the gatekeepers while the winners are busy building new gates. Winners own their path. Losers apologize for it. Winners speak with clean, direct language about what they learned, what they built, and what they can execute. Losers lead with disclaimers, constantly reminding the room of what they lack. Winners do not confuse humility with self-erasure. They stand tall in the reality of their competence. They know that false modesty is just arrogance wrapped in fear. Winners trust evidence. Losers chase approval. Winners anchor their confidence in repeated, observable results. Losers keep needing one more outside stamp, one more pat on the head, one more external validation to feel safe. Winners understand that self-respect is never granted by a committee. It is earned through relentless, undeniable action. You are standing at the exact point of divergence. You can continue to let a phantom rulebook dictate your worth, or you can step into the arena of owned legitimacy. You can keep hiding your competence behind a wall of disclaimers, or you can start building the kind of undeniable proof that forces the market to pay attention. The choice is entirely yours, but the consequences of that choice will echo for the rest of your career. Every day you wait is a day you surrender your leverage to someone less capable but more courageous. The legitimacy trap has kept you playing small for years. It has convinced you that your self-directed learning is a liability rather than the ultimate modern advantage. But recognizing the lie is only the first move. To truly break free, you have to look at the architecture of the trap itself. You have to understand why the world became so obsessed with labels in the first place, and why the gatekeepers are terrified of people who can bypass their toll booths. The illusion is powerful, but its foundations are crumbling. Soon, we will expose the hidden gears of the system that trained you to doubt yourself, revealing a massive vulnerability in their design that you can exploit starting today. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Credential Machine. Imagine standing in front of a massive automated sorting facility. Conveyor belts move at blinding speed. Scanners flash red and green in the dark. The machine does not open the boxes to see what is inside. It does not care about the quality, the craftsmanship, or the immense value hidden beneath the cardboard. It only reads the barcodes printed on the outside. If the barcode is missing, the box is violently shoved into the reject pile, even if it contains solid gold. This is the exact environment you operate in every single day. You have been treating this system like a wise, all-knowing judge of your human worth. It is not a judge, it is just a machine. In this chapter, we are going to rip the steel casing off this machine. You will see exactly how the gears turn. You will understand why degrees act as risk filters rather than clean measures of competence. Once you see the mechanical truth of how the modern economy actually sorts people, the spell will break. You will stop taking rejection personally, and you will start playing the game with cold, strategic clarity. The illusion of the perfect mirror. We are taught from childhood that the credential system is a perfect mirror of merit. We are conditioned to believe that if we are truly good, the system will automatically recognize us, and if the system rejects us, we must be fundamentally defective. This is a devastating lie. You must stop treating the market filtering mechanism as a reflection of your soul. When you believe the system is pure merit, every closed door feels like a personal verdict on your intelligence. But when you understand the system as a crude signaling structure, your entire strategy improves. Clear thinking replaces your emotional collapse. Let us look at how this machine was actually built. Institutional schooling trained generations of people to equate approval with competence. As industrial and bureaucratic systems exploded in size, they needed scalable ways to filter thousands of strangers. They could not interview everyone deeply. They could not test every applicant. They needed a shortcut. Degrees became that shortcut. They became shorthand for trust, conformity, and a baseline ability to follow instructions. But then the game changed. Credential inflation flooded the market. As more people gained access to formal education, the signaling value of a basic degree plummeted. It is exactly like printing too much money. When the currency floods the streets, the value of the dollar drops, and you suddenly need more dollars to buy the exact same loaf of bread. Employers did not respond to this inflation by building better ways to test real proof. They responded by lazily demanding even more credentials. The bar moved, not because the work required more genius, but because the sorting machine needed a faster way to reject people. The cowardice of the gatekeeper. You probably assume that the people evaluating you are deeply analyzing your potential. They are not. Most hiring and credibility decisions are made under extreme uncertainty by people who are overworked, stressed, and terrified of making a mistake. Under uncertainty, human beings panic and look for shortcuts. Credentials are the biggest, safest shortcut in the modern economy. This is where proxy-based hiring dominates. Managers rarely have the time or the technical skill to deeply test your competence. Instead of evaluating your actual ability, they evaluate a proxy for your ability. A prestigious degree reduces their perceived hiring risk. There is a hidden, cowardly logic that runs through corporate corridors. No one gets fired for hiring the candidate from the elite university. If the prestigious candidate fails, the manager can blame the university. If the uncredentialed candidate fails, the manager takes the blame for taking a risk. This is not about your skill, it is about their survival. This dynamic creates a massive prestige bias. A prestigious institution creates a powerful halo effect. The label spills over into perceptions of intelligence, discipline, and reliability, creating assumptions of broad competence that the actual evidence rarely supports. You look at a fancy title and assume the person is a genius. The manager looks at the fancy title and assumes their own job is safe. That is the entire transaction. Once you realize this, the shame of not having the right label begins to evaporate. Dangerous fairy tales you need to drop. Before you can navigate this machine, you have to purge the myths that are keeping you paralyzed. Blind cynicism will lead you to do nothing, and blind optimism will lead you to position yourself terribly. You need strategic realism. The first myth is the comforting lie that degrees do not matter anymore. In some fields, they still matter a great deal. Pretending otherwise creates avoidable pain and endless frustration. The smarter question is not whether they matter, but where they matter, how much they matter, and what specific forms of proof can compete with them. The second myth is the romantic idea that if you are talented enough, the market will notice you automatically. Talent is completely invisible without proof and signal clarity. Many world-class performers stay hidden in the shadows forever because they refuse to package their value. Merit needs visibility to move. The market is deaf and blind until you force it to see you. The third myth is the corporate public relations fantasy that skills-based hiring has already replaced credential bias. Public narratives change much faster than organizational habits. A company might announce a progressive hiring policy, but that announcement does not change the deeply ingrained behavior of the middle manager reviewing your application. Signal rules in the real world are incredibly sticky. The final myth is that the answer is to hate the system. Rage does not create leverage. Bitterness clouds your judgment and makes you sound defensive. Pragmatism beats rebellion every single time when your actual goal is progress. You do not need to burn the machine down. You just need to learn how to bypass its sensors. Mapping the battlefield. You must learn to decode the market instead of moralizing it. Stop asking if a barrier is fair. Ask what signals that specific arena values. Ask whether the gate keeping you out is a legal requirement, a cultural expectation, or merely a lazy habit. To do this, you must sort every opportunity into one of three buckets. The first bucket contains closed arenas. These are heavily regulated professions where credentials are non-negotiable by law. If you want to be a surgeon or a civil engineer signing off on a bridge, you need the degree. In a closed arena, you either pursue the formal credential or you choose another lane entirely. The second bucket contains hybrid arenas. Here, credentials help open doors, but undeniable proof can offset the lack of a pedigree. This is where most modern corporate roles exist. In a hybrid arena, your strategy is to strengthen both the quality of your proof and the readability of your signals. You overwhelm their proxy filter with direct evidence of your competence. The third bucket contains open arenas. These are output-driven, entrepreneurial, and creator-led markets. Here, outcomes and reputation completely dominate. The market rewards visible usefulness faster than any piece of paper. In an open arena, you move fast and let your visible work do the heavy lifting. To execute this, you need to run a signal map exercise right now. Pick one target role, market, or audience you want to conquer. List the top 5 signals that seem to influence trust in that specific space. Mark which signals you already possess, which ones you can build quickly, and which ones are totally irrelevant. Use this map to stop guessing and start positioning yourself with lethal accuracy. Immunity to prestige shock. You have to build emotional distance from prestige. Right now, you suffer from prestige shock. You see a famous school name or a massive corporate title, and your brain triggers instant self-doubt. You freeze. You have to train yourself to slow down and look for direct evidence of actual ability. When you see a strong label, pause before assigning it magical power. Ask yourself what evidence actually supports the assumption of status. Respect the signal, but never surrender your spine to it. Train yourself to see labels as probability hints, not final truths. To navigate this effectively, watch actions, not announcements. Read the job descriptions, but study who actually gets hired. Talk to the people inside the field who are doing the work, not just the people selling advice on the internet. Real signal rules show up in behavior, not in policy manuals. You must also learn the specific language of your chosen arena. Some markets care deeply about formal titles. Some care exclusively about raw outcomes. Some care entirely about who trusts you and who you know. Speak the dialect of the room you want to enter. If you doubt that this is possible, study the real people who navigated the system intelligently. Steve Jobs built enormous, world-changing authority without finishing college. Richard Branson built a global business empire and massive credibility entirely outside formal academic prestige. Abraham Lincoln built intellectual force and political dominance largely through relentless, self-directed study. Their stories are not excuses for you to skip discipline. They are undeniable proof that institutions do not own excellence. The pragmatic operator. When you apply this structural understanding, the outcomes transform your reality. You stop taking credential bias as proof that you are inferior. You stop wasting your precious energy trying to win in badly chosen closed arenas. You begin making calmer, highly strategic career decisions. You identify the exact markets where your proof can compete effectively. You become far more selective, intensely focused, and incredibly hard to manipulate. Ultimately, you understand the hidden rules better than most of the people playing inside the game, and you use that system knowledge as leverage instead of letting the system use your insecurity against you. But you must watch out for the traps along this path. Do not become cynical and anti-institution. Cynicism makes you sound immature and defensive, and it blinds you to the situations where credentials truly do matter. Stay practical. Degrees are tools and signals, not gods and not trash. Do not ignore real gatekeeping and keep throwing yourself at closed arenas unprepared. Repeated rejection will only deepen your self-doubt, and you will misread structural barriers as personal failures. Sort your markets clearly. Do not overreact and believe that raw proof alone solves everything. Proof matters intensely, but signal readability still matters too. Great work will stay completely invisible if you package it badly. You cannot just build it and hope they come. Finally, stop comparing yourself emotionally instead of strategically. When you see a label and freeze, you stop noticing your own massive assets. Ask what the label actually predicts, what it completely fails to predict, and what specific proof you hold that can beat it. You now see the machine for what it is. You understand the gears, the biases, and the cowardly logic that keeps the credential system running. The external game is no longer a mystery to you. But knowing how the market works is only half the battle. There is a much darker problem lurking inside your own mind. Even when you bypass the gatekeepers, even when you win the role, and even when you hold the undeniable proof of your competence in your hands, a quiet terror can still wash over you. You can do the work perfectly and still feel like an absolute imposter. This is not normal insecurity. It is a highly specific, deeply installed psychological virus that targets self-directed learners. And if you do not extract it, it will sabotage your success the moment you achieve it. Let us examine the ghost in your programming. Chapter 3: False Fraud. You sit at the conference table. You deliver the exact solution the room desperately needs. The client nods in agreement. The manager approves the strategy. The numbers go up. You have done the heavy lifting. You have solved the complex problem, and you have secured the win. And yet, a cold, creeping dread washes over the back of your neck. You wait for someone to stand up and point a finger at you. You wait for the alarm to sound. You wait to be exposed as a trespasser. You call this imposter syndrome. You tell yourself you just lack confidence. You tell yourself you need to read one more book or take one more course to finally feel secure. You are diagnosing the wrong disease. You cannot defeat a feeling you keep naming badly. If you call everything low confidence, you completely miss the true mechanism destroying your momentum. Precision creates better action, and the right diagnosis stops wasted effort. You are not suffering from a lack of skill. You are suffering from a highly specific psychological infection. We call this false fraud. The anatomy of a phantom threat. Let us draw a brutal, unforgiving line between an actual fraud and a false fraud. An actual fraud pretends to have competence they do not possess. They lie about their skills, they fake their results, they steal credit from the people actually doing the work. They are charlatans selling empty boxes. A false fraud is the exact opposite. A false fraud has the competence, does the work, delivers the result, but deeply doubts the legitimacy of their own execution. The emotional experience might feel identical in your chest. Your heart might pound, and your palms might sweat, just like a criminal waiting to be caught. But the response to that feeling must be radically different. When you misdiagnose yourself as a fraud, you create massive real-world losses. You hesitate in high-value moments. You present yourself weakly despite holding strong competence. You develop an excessive dependence on reassurance from people who often know less than you do. This problem is incredibly common among capable, self-directed learners. You can explain the work. You can do the work. You can measure the positive impact of the work. And you still question whether you are allowed to count. You underestimate how many of your daily decisions are being distorted by this hidden script. You think you are making strategic choices, but you are actually making fear-based retreats. What feels like a deeply personal failing is actually a highly predictable, patterned response to a rigged game. The architecture of your insecurity. Let us look at the internal mechanics of this self-taught imposter syndrome. The cycle is always the same. You learn something valuable. You apply it successfully in the real world. You generate a tangible result. You feel a brief moment of pride. And then a prestige cue appears. Someone mentions their elite university in passing. Someone flashes a massive corporate title. Someone uses dense technical jargon to intimidate the room. In a fraction of a second, your mind violently discounts your own undeniable evidence and elevates their superficial cue. You throw away your results and bow to their label. This happens because you are suffering from external validation addiction. Praise becomes a temporary drug. Silence feels like absolute disproof of your worth. Institutional approval becomes the ultimate fantasy cure. You do not merely seek feedback to improve your work. You seek official permission to believe your own evidence. Years of institutional conditioning have created a mental dependency where your confidence is entirely outsourced to third parties. You are committing the container versus content error every single day. You judge your knowledge by the container it came in rather than the content itself. You completely ignore whether your knowledge works in the real world. You mistakenly downgrade your own spectacular results simply because your learning path was unconventional. If you learned a brilliant strategy by testing it in the market and losing your own money until you figured it out, you call yourself an amateur. If someone else learned that exact same strategy sitting in a velvet chair in a famous lecture hall, you call them an expert. You keep replaying an old toxic rule installed by your early schooling. The rule says that if it was not stamped by an authority, it does not count. This is not a fact problem. This is a belief architecture problem. The lies you tell yourself about confidence. You have tried to fix this feeling before. You have listened to the generic advice, and it has failed you completely. The first myth you must abandon is the idea that you just need to be more confident. Confidence without evidence feels entirely fake. Fake confidence collapses under the slightest pressure. When you try to pump yourself up with empty bravado, your brain knows you are lying. Real authority requires proof plus interpretation. The second myth is the comforting lie that everyone feels this way, so you should just ignore it. Common does not mean harmless. A disease can be common and still be fatal to your career. Repeated legitimacy doubt shapes your behavior over years and decades. It dictates who you talk to, what you charge, and what rooms you dare to enter. Ignoring a toxic pattern is not the same as outgrowing it. The third myth is the most expensive trap of all. You tell yourself that one more course, one more certificate, or one more degree will finally end the feeling. New knowledge can certainly help your skill, but if your underlying belief stays exactly the same, the finish line just keeps moving. Your mind will say, yes, I have this certificate, but now I need the next stamp to be truly legitimate. It is a treadmill of infinite inadequacy. The final myth is that public praise solves the issue. Praise helps, but only briefly if your self-trust is weak. External approval without internal integration becomes emotional sugar. You feel a quick high, you smile, you feel safe for an hour, and then you crash again the second the next prestige trigger appears in the room. You cannot build a fortress out of other people's compliments. The legitimacy audit. We are going to destroy this pattern right now. You are going to run a legitimacy audit. Grab a pen and paper. You will list 5 recent moments when you felt like a fraud. For each specific moment, you will write down exactly what happened, who was present in the room, and what specific thought fired instantly in your mind. Then you will mark whether your fear was actually about a gap in your skill or a panic about your social legitimacy. Did you fail to know the answer, or did you just feel like you lacked the pedigree to deliver the answer? This high-level exercise works by separating the trigger, the belief, and the fact, so the invisible pattern becomes glaringly visible. You drag the monster out of the dark and force it into the light. Next, you will use the container versus content test in live environments. When the panic hits you in a meeting, you will ask yourself one question. If I had learned this exact same concept in a famous classroom, would I trust it more? If the answer is yes, your doubt is entirely about status, not substance. This single question disrupts your automatic self-discounting. It forces your logical brain to override your conditioned panic. You must also identify your specific prestige triggers. Notice if you collapse around specific school names, fancy job titles, technical language used as intimidation, or formal interview settings. Everyone has a specific kryptonite. Once you know your trigger, you can brace for the impact, instead of being blindsided by it. You must track your overcompensation behaviors. Watch yourself when you start talking too much to prove you belong. Catch yourself hiding your massive achievements under fake humility. Notice when you overstudy and hoard information instead of shipping your work to the market. Stop asking for permission when a decision is already yours to make. Finally, you must re-anchor in evidence. Write down 3 real problems you solved entirely through self-directed learning. Add exactly what changed in the real world because of your action. Did revenue increase? Did a broken system get fixed? Did a client stop panicking? Read this list every single time the fraud feeling spikes. This is not blind affirmation. This is cold, hard evidence retrieval. You are slapping your panicked mind with undeniable reality. The physical reality of panic. You have to catch the first thought, not the 10th thought. The first thought always reveals the installed belief. The later thoughts are usually just clever rationalizations your brain invents to justify the panic. Speed matters immensely when studying your own reactions. You must catch the lie the second it forms. You must also notice your body signals. The panic shows up in your physiology before it reaches your conscious mind. Notice your tight shoulders. Notice your shallow breathing. Notice the sudden drop in your vocal strength. Notice how you physically lean away from the table. These physical cues often appear before any conscious explanation. When you feel them, you must replace comparison with inspection. Instead of telling yourself they are better than you, ask what evidence you actually have. Instead of telling yourself you do not belong, ask what specific problem in the room you can solve right now. This shifts you from an emotional fog to a highly useful evaluation. If you think this level of self-directed authority is impossible, study the famous examples of unconventional mastery. Abraham Lincoln built a legendary legal and political mind entirely through relentless, self-directed study. He did not wait for an institution to bless his intellect. Frida Kahlo developed her artistic mastery and distinct identity entirely outside neat, institutional pathways. Steve Jobs built world-changing influence and technological dominance without finishing a formal degree. Their lives do not erase the need for high standards. Their lives reveal that authority can be earned in multiple ways, and institutions do not hold a monopoly on excellence. They built their own containers. The new standard of operation. When you apply these tools relentlessly, your reality shifts. You identify the exact situations that trigger your false fraud feelings. You completely stop calling every anxiety episode a competence problem. You reduce your shame because the pattern becomes understandable and predictable. As you master this, you catch your legitimacy panic early and recover faster. You become far less vulnerable to prestige theater. You speak with absolute steadiness in credential-heavy settings. Ultimately, you reach a point where you no longer let social signals erase your own evidence. You develop lethal emotional precision under pressure. You become capable of entering status-heavy rooms without ever surrendering your internal ground. But you must avoid the common pitfalls that trap amateurs. Do not overcorrect and dismiss all criticism. This turns healthy learning into toxic defensiveness. Not every doubt is false. Sometimes you actually do not know what you are doing. Separate your legitimacy doubt from your real skill gaps and address each honestly. Do not keep studying the feeling without changing your behavior. Insight alone can become just another comfort ritual. You can journal about your imposter syndrome for 10 years and never change your life. The false belief survives if your actions still obey it. Pair every insight with one concrete behavior change, such as speaking more directly, dropping a disclaimer, or sharing one piece of public proof. Do not rely on generic affirmations. Vague positive language rarely beats old conditioning. Looking in the mirror and saying you are a champion does nothing when the room demands actual competence. The mind rejects claims that feel disconnected from facts. Tie every single confidence statement to real, undeniable evidence. Finally, do not confuse your nerves with inauthenticity. Feeling nervous does not mean you are pretending. Pressure often rises simply because the stakes matter. Your heart is supposed to beat faster when you are doing something important. Judge yourself by your preparation and your evidence, not by your comfort level. Comfort is the enemy of growth. You now have the tools to diagnose the panic. You know how to separate a lack of skill from a lack of permission. You know how to anchor yourself in the cold reality of your own results. The phantom threat of the false fraud is finally losing its grip on your mind. But knowing you are not a fraud is only a defensive maneuver. It stops the bleeding, but it does not win the war. To truly command the room, you have to change the fundamental way you introduce yourself to the world. You are still using words that quietly apologize for your existence. You are still wearing a label that signals deficiency to everyone who meets you. There is a specific linguistic shift you must make, a radical change in how you frame your entire history that will instantly alter how the market values you. The words you use are currently building your cage, but in the next phase, they will become your ultimate weapon. Chapter 4: The Architecture of Posture. You walk into the room, you have the answer, you have the experience, you have the exact solution the client is begging for. But before you even open your mouth to deliver the massive value you hold, you clear your throat and offer a subtle, almost invisible apology. You tell them you do not have the traditional background. You tell them you are just self-taught. You hand them a loaded gun and you point it directly at your own credibility. Why do you do this? You do this because you are operating under a defensive identity. You are wearing a label that acts as a set of instructions for your own defeat. This chapter is about destroying that label. We are going to slowly unpack the invisible script running in your head, and we are going to replace it with a linguistic architecture that forces the world to take you seriously. You are about to transition from a stigma to a strategy. The weaponization of words. Identity shapes your behavior long before your strategy ever appears on the battlefield. The words you use to describe yourself to the mirror and to the market are not cosmetic decorations. They are operational commands. They train your nervous system. They influence the expectations of every single person you meet. If your identity language is weak, your physical delivery will be weak. You will lead with an apology instead of leading with your value. You will frame your unconventional path as a tragic deficiency rather than a deliberate, calculated choice. You will reinforce the exact same hierarchy you are desperately trying to escape. A bad label quietly sabotages spectacular work. You can build a brilliant system, but if you present it while calling yourself an amateur, the room will treat the system like an amateur experiment. But a better identity creates cleaner action. When you change the label, you speak differently. You choose your battles differently. You hold yourself to a higher, more unforgiving standard because your new identity demands it. Losers let the world assign them a label based on what they lack. Winners assign themselves a label based on what they can execute. We need to reframe your entire learning path right now. You did not merely miss formal validation. You did not fall through the cracks of the system. In many cases, you actively selected, adapted, and pursued your own curriculum. That is not a random accident. That is agency. You must move from the stigma of being self-taught to the strategic power of being self-directed. The phrase self-taught implies something accidental, unstructured, and second best. It sounds like you stumbled into knowledge in the dark. The phrase self-directed implies agency, judgment, and deliberate execution. It sounds like you drew a map and conquered the territory. This is the fundamental shift from borrowed legitimacy to owned legitimacy. Borrowed legitimacy begs the question of who approved you. It requires a stamp from a gatekeeper. Owned legitimacy stands firmly on what you know, what you built, what you solved, and what you can explain under pressure. This shift is entirely psychological before it ever becomes public. You have to understand the principle of frontier learning. At the absolute edge of any field, every single expert becomes self-directed. Institutions can teach you the historical foundations, but no university can pre-package the live frontier of a rapidly evolving industry. The ability to direct your own learning is not a backup plan for people who failed to get into college. It is the ultimate modern power skill. When you say you are self-taught, you sound defensive. When you say you built your own curriculum, you signal massive initiative and responsibility. When you say you learned this by solving real problems in the trenches, you signal applied, lethal competence. The lies of the humble operator. You will resist this shift. Your mind will feed you comforting myths to keep you playing small and safe. The first myth is that words do not matter. You tell yourself that only the hard work matters, and that the market will eventually recognize your silent genius. This is a lie. Words shape your self-image, and your self-image dictates your tone, your posture, and your action. Repeated language becomes an identity habit. If you call yourself an imposter every morning, you will negotiate like an imposter every afternoon. The second myth is that changing your identity language is just empty semantics. You think it's a cheap marketing trick. Empty semantics would be making false claims about things you cannot actually do. We are not talking about lying. We are talking about using more accurate, powerful language for the brutal work you actually did. Accuracy builds strength when apology has been distorting your reality for years. You are finally telling the truth about your own competence. The third myth is that owning your path means becoming arrogant. You have been trained to believe that shrinking is polite and standing tall is offensive. Arrogance is inflating your worth beyond your evidence. Ownership is simply refusing to understate your evidence. Confidence without apology is not ego. It is clean, undeniable alignment. You are simply stating the facts of your capability without adding attacks of shame. The final myth is that identity work is soft, philosophical, and impractical. You want tactics, not psychology. But identity is the most practical mechanism in your entire life. It determines what opportunities you pursue. It determines how you present yourself once you get those opportunities. It determines whether you protect or betray your own progress when the pressure rises and the room challenges your authority. The architecture of your new posture. You must replace your deficit labels with ownership language immediately. You must banish the phrase, "I am just self-taught" from your vocabulary forever. You replace it with, "I built my own curriculum." You stop saying, "I do not have the degree." You replace it with, "I invested my education differently." You stop saying, "I learned online." You replace it with, "I learned through focused self-direction and relentless application." You must build a personal learning narrative. You define exactly what you chose to learn. You define exactly why you chose it. You define exactly what massive problems it now helps you solve. This organizes your scattered, chaotic effort into a coherent, razor-sharp identity story. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. You are the architect of your own capability. Next, you must write a one-sentence authority statement. You state the domain you understand. You state the kind of problem you solve. You state it without a single ounce of apology, fluff, or status begging. You practice identity-congruent introductions. You introduce yourself by your function, not your lack. You lead with your competence and your direction. You only mention your learning path when it adds specific value or context to the conversation. You do not offer it as a confession. To master this, you must study the real people whose identities completely outran conventional validation. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs are undeniable examples of self-directed learning and ruthless execution. They did not wait for a committee to bless their visions. They built their own containers. Abraham Lincoln is the ultimate example of disciplined self-education translating into massive public authority. He read the law, he applied the law, and he commanded the room. Frida Kahlo built a distinct, immortal identity through her lived work rather than conforming to neat institutional packaging. Their stories are not anomalies, they are blueprints. They prove that authority is taken, not granted. There are specific linguistic tricks to locking this in. You must permanently remove the word "just" from your self-description. Saying you are just a freelancer or just a self-taught coder shrinks your authority before anyone else even has the chance to attack it. It signals deep insecurity. It invites the room to rank you lower. You must always lead with what you solve. Problems create relevance. Relevance creates attention. Attention makes your background incredibly easy to understand. You must keep your story completely concrete. Vague identity claims sound inflated and desperate. Specific actions sound credible and dangerous. Name your projects. Name your results. Name your deliberate learning choices. Practice your strongest, truthful framing. Do not practice the most humble version. Do not practice the most dramatic version. Practice the clearest, strongest, most accurate version of who you are and what you can do. The inevitable transformation. When you execute this identity shift, the outcomes are immediate and compounding. The good outcomes appear first. You completely stop introducing yourself from a place of lack. You become hyper-aware of how your language shapes your physical posture in a room. You feel the reflexive shame about your unconventional path begin to evaporate. You stop dreading the moment someone asks you about your background. Then the excellent outcomes arrive. Other people begin reading your path as highly intentional and fiercely disciplined. Your communication becomes cleaner, sharper, and infinitely more persuasive. You stop sabotaging your own pitches with self-lowering labels. The room stops questioning your legitimacy because you have stopped questioning it yourself. You project a cold, undeniable certainty that forces them to focus on your value. Finally, you reach the best outcomes. Your identity becomes so stable and so deeply rooted that public proof and signaling feel entirely natural instead of forced. You start operating exactly like someone who already belongs in the most serious high-stakes rooms. Your unconventional path transforms from a source of endless apology into a source of undeniable authority. You become a category of one. The traps of the new skin. This transition is dangerous, and things can go wrong if you are not vigilant. The first problem is that you change the words, but you refuse to change the underlying beliefs. When you do this, the new language sounds completely hollow, even to you. The people listening to you will sense the hesitation vibrating under your polished phrasing. You fix this by pairing your new identity language with relentless proof building and constant evidence review. The words must rest on a foundation of reality. The second problem is swinging wildly into performative arrogance. Overcompensation is still just insecurity wearing louder clothes. It destroys trust instantly. When you puff your chest and act untouchable, the room knows you are terrified. You fix this by grounding every single claim in what you can actually do and what you can actually explain. True authority is calm. It does not need to shout. The third problem is telling a confusing, rambling story. Too many details will bury your point. Too much defensiveness will make people focus entirely on what you are missing. If you spend 10 minutes explaining why you did not go to college, you sound guilty. You fix this by using a brutally simple structure. Tell them what you chose, tell them why you chose it, and tell them what it lets you solve. Then stop talking. The final problem is that you keep waiting for other people to validate your new identity. That simply recreates the exact external validation addiction we are trying to cure. The shift must begin as a private, unbreakable standard before it ever becomes public recognition. You fix this by repeating the identity through your action, your language, and your visible work until it feels earned, normal, and absolute. You do not ask the market if you are allowed to be self-directed. You inform the market that you are. You have now rewritten the script. You have killed the apology. You have claimed the posture of the self-directed operator. Your internal language is finally aligned with your actual competence. But a powerful identity is only the foundation. Words, no matter how sharp, eventually demand physical evidence. The market will listen to your new introduction, but then it will demand to see the receipts. You are about to discover the exact mechanism for turning your invisible competence into an undeniable physical force that no gatekeeper can ever ignore. Chapter 5, Proof First. You watch them walk away with the prize. You know their work is sloppy. You know their thinking is shallow. You know you could execute the strategy in half the time and with twice the precision. And yet they get the client, they get the promotion, and they get the respect. You sit there fuming, blaming the system, blaming their elite degree, and blaming the unfairness of the market. But the market is not unfair. The market is simply blind. It cannot reward what it cannot see. You have been hoarding your competence in the dark, expecting the world to possess some kind of magical vision. You expect people to look into your mind and recognize your genius. They will not. They cannot. People infer ability from available evidence, not from your private reality. Silence creates a massive vacuum, and the market always fills that vacuum with negative assumptions. The factor you are missing is not another piece of paper from a gatekeeper. The factor you are missing is the physical manifestation of your capability. You must force your invisible skill into the physical world. Your best answer to credential doubt is never endless self-defense. It is public, undeniable evidence that makes your value impossible to dismiss. The tragedy of the invisible genius. You have been fed a diet of comforting lies about how the world discovers talent. The most dangerous myth you believe is that if you are simply good enough, people will notice you automatically. This is a fantasy. Hidden competence loses to visible mediocrity every single day of the week. Many brilliant, highly capable people are completely ignored because they are entirely invisible. Attention does not automatically flow to merit. Visibility must be aggressively built, not passively assumed. Good work does not speak for itself. Good work whispers in a crowded, screaming room. You have to hand it a megaphone. You also believe the myth that a portfolio is only for designers, coders, or creatives. You think that because you work in strategy or management or operations, you cannot show your work. This is a failure of imagination. Anyone who solves problems can create proof. Proof can be writing, frameworks, audits, results, analyses, or before and after transformations. The format changes depending on your field, but the underlying principle stays exactly the same. You must give the market something to inspect. Then there is the myth of perfectionism. You tell yourself you need to be world-class before you share anything with the public. You hide your projects in private folders because you think they are not ready. This is just cowardice disguised as high standards. Early proof can be modest as long as it is real. Credibility grows through visible progression, not through sudden, flawless perfection. When you wait for perfect proof, you create endless delays and you feed your own insecurity. Your proof stack never gets started and you remain a ghost. Finally, you suffer from the myth that effort creates credibility. You want the market to reward you because you worked late and you studied hard and you cared deeply. Effort matters to you, but effort alone is not a market signal. The market does not care about your sweat. The market cares about your impact. The question is not how hard you worked, but what actually changed in reality because you showed up. Proof must point directly to usefulness, not busyness. The currency of the real world. You must begin turning your abstract knowledge into public artifacts. An artifact is anything that survives outside of your own head. It is an article breaking down a complex industry trend. It is a project you built from scratch. It is an analysis of a failing business model. It is a presentation you delivered to a local group. It is a case breakdown of a massive problem and the exact steps required to solve it. These artifacts become your new credentials. A degree is merely a signal about your likely competence. A body of visible work is hard evidence of your actual competence. Evidence beats inference every single time it is presented clearly. But you cannot merely show activity. You must turn your activity into outcomes. Do not just show the market what you did. Show the market what changed because you did it. You must clearly define the problem you faced, the specific action you took, and the undeniable result you generated. When you do this, you replace vague self-description with direct evidence. Instead of sitting in an interview and saying you are highly knowledgeable, you slide a document across the table that shows your exact reasoning. Instead of saying you are skilled, you show the work and the financial effect of that work. Instead of begging them to trust you, you make trust the easiest, most logical choice they can possibly make. This changes both external perception and internal confidence. Other people trust you more because they can physically inspect your value. But more importantly, you trust yourself more because your claims are finally backed by visible results. Repeated proof turns your self-belief from wishful thinking into grounded, unshakable authority. You no longer have to hype yourself up in the mirror. You just look at the stack of evidence you built with your own two hands. The architecture of undeniable evidence. To build this authority, you must construct the proof triangle. The first side of the triangle is public artifacts. You create visible work samples that show your thinking and your execution. You choose formats that fit your specific field and your target audience, and you make them incredibly easy to find and easy to understand. The second side of the triangle is documented results. You record measurable improvements, solved problems, and concrete outcomes. You use hard numbers wherever possible, and you use crystal clear descriptions where numbers are not available. You turn every single result into a short, punchy proof statement. The third side of the triangle is peer validation. You gather feedback from the people who have directly seen your work in the trenches. You prioritize specific details over generic praise. You use endorsements that explicitly mention your outcomes, your judgment, and your reliability under fire. To fuel this triangle, you must adopt the weekly build habit. You will produce one visible proof asset every single week. You will keep the scope small enough to actually finish, but clear enough to matter. This trains your consistency and compounds your evidence over time. You stop consuming endlessly, and you start producing relentlessly. When you produce, you will rely heavily on the case study format. You start with the bleeding problem. You show your exact reasoning and your step-by-step process. You end with the final result and what that result means for the future. This structure makes your competence entirely legible instead of burying it in technical jargon. You must choose problems worth solving publicly. Look for the recurring nightmares in your industry. Solve them in ways people can inspect. The more painful and relevant the problem, the stronger your proof becomes. Right now, you need to create a proof inventory. Sit down and list all your past projects, your hidden wins, your private insights, and the massive problems you have already solved behind closed doors. Mark which of these can become public artifacts, which can become case studies, and which can generate testimonials. You will quickly realize you already possess far more raw proof than you ever thought possible. You just never bothered to package it. The laws of lethal visibility. As you build your proof stack, you must obey the laws of visibility. The first law is to always ask what changed. This simple question keeps your proof focused entirely on effect rather than effort. It sharpens your story. It strips away the fluff. It forces the audience to care because they see the transformation you are capable of delivering. The second law is to show usefulness, not complexity. Amateurs try to sound smart by making things complicated. Professionals prove they are smart by making complicated things simple. People are deeply impressed by clarity that solves a real problem. Complexity without value just looks like a desperate performance. Simplicity combined with massive results looks like absolute mastery. The third law is to build in public without oversharing. You share enough of your process to demonstrate your capability, but you keep confidential client details strictly private. Public proof does not mean reckless exposure. It means strategic revelation. You show the engine, but you protect the keys. The fourth law is to start with the evidence you already have available. Your old meeting notes can become brilliant industry insights. Your past operational wins can become devastatingly effective case studies. The informal help you gave a colleague last year can become undeniable proof of your leadership and judgment. You do not need to start from zero. You just need to harvest what you have already grown. If you doubt the power of this approach, look at the titans who let their work become their ultimate authority. Steve Jobs was judged by the revolutionary products he placed in the hands of millions, not by the college transcripts he abandoned. Jimi Hendrix built legendary, immortal authority through undeniable skill displayed in public, forcing the world to recognize his genius through raw sonic evidence. Frida Kahlo built her artistic legitimacy through distinctive, visceral work that demanded attention, completely ignoring the neat institutional pathways of her time. They did not ask for permission to be great. They built the proof and forced the world to deal with it. The unstoppable momentum of proof. When you execute this strategy, the outcomes will completely alter the trajectory of your career. The good outcomes happen almost immediately. You can finally point to real work instead of relying on awkward self-description. You feel the crushing pressure to verbally defend your worth vanish from your shoulders. You begin building a visible track record that speaks for you before you even enter the room. Then the excellent outcomes take hold. Strangers start trusting your expertise faster. Massive opportunities become infinitely easier to win because your evidence lowers the uncertainty for the decision maker. Your internal confidence becomes deeply grounded because the work is real, physical, and visible to the naked eye. You stop feeling like an imposter because imposters do not have a 10-year archive of solved problems. Ultimately, you achieve the best outcomes. Your body of proof becomes vastly stronger than the absence of any formal credential. People begin associating your actual name with specific competence and highly specific results. Your work starts opening heavy doors before you even speak a single word. You become a force of nature in your industry. But you must guard against the traps that ruin this momentum. Do not create proof that shows massive effort but zero impact. This makes your work look busy but entirely useless. People might admire the sheer volume of your output, but they will completely miss the usefulness of your mind. Rewrite every single piece of proof around the problem solved and the result created. Do not hide your best work in private folders. Private evidence cannot compound public trust. Secrecy usually comes from fear, not from strategy. Share sanitized, partial, or summarized versions of your biggest wins so the market can see your capability without compromising your integrity. Do not publish inconsistent random work. Randomness weakens your perceived expertise. If you post about marketing one day, supply chain logistics the next, and graphic design the following week, you confuse the market. Confusion kills credibility. Choose a specific problem category and build repeated, undeniable proof around that single domain. You now understand the absolute necessity of physical evidence. You know how to build the artifacts, document the outcomes, and stack the proof until your competence is undeniable. You have the raw material to crush any doubt about your legitimacy. But raw material is not enough. If you take your brilliant proof and present it in a language the market cannot understand, you will still lose. You can have the cure for a disease, but if you put it in a bottle with a confusing label, no one will ever buy it. You must learn how to translate your deep competence into rapid, readable signals that busy people can process in a fraction of a second. The market is moving too fast to dig for your value. You are about to learn how to make your expertise strike them like lightning. Chapter 6: The Translation of Competence. You have done exactly what was asked of you. You built the proof. You documented the outcomes. You compiled a mountain of undeniable physical evidence. You walk into the marketplace expecting the heavy iron gates to swing open, but instead you are met with a blank stare. The decision maker glances at your work, looks at their watch, and chooses the competitor who has half your actual skill but twice your polish. You feel a massive surge of righteous anger. You assume the game is completely rigged. You assume they are blinded by prestige. But the game is not rigged against your skill. The game is simply filtering out your static. You are broadcasting a brilliant message on a frequency no one is tuned to hear. You have the substance, but you lack the translation. You are about to learn the precise mechanism for making your expertise instantly understandable to a world that has zero time to dig for your hidden genius. You are about to learn how to make your value strike the room like lightning. The illusion of the silent master. There is a deeply romantic idea that infects ambitious people. It is the belief that good work speaks for itself. You think that if you just put your head down, grind in the dark, and produce spectacular results, the market will magically tap you on the shoulder and hand you a crown. This is a devastating hallucination. Good work does not speak for itself. Good work whispers in a crowded, screaming room. The market is chaotic, exhausted, and overwhelmed. People form impressions in a fraction of a second. Those first impressions dictate whether your carefully constructed proof ever gets examined at all. Better packaging does not replace your value, but it absolutely determines whether your value ever gets a chance to breathe. You might resist this. You might think that packaging your value is manipulative. You might think that focusing on how you are perceived is fake, corporate, or shallow. This is the myth of purity, and it is keeping you broke and ignored. Fake communication misrepresents substance. It sells an empty box. Ethical communication clarifies real substance. It paints a bright red target on the box so the right people can find it. The difference is honesty. When your value is real but your presentation is weak, confusing, or invisible, the better packaged competitor will beat you every single time. Silence is not purity. Silence is a strategic weakness. You might also believe that only loud, aggressive extroverts can build this kind of visibility. You picture a slick salesperson dominating a room, but visibility does not require loudness. It requires consistency, clarity, and relevance. Quiet people can project massive authority through sharp writing, precise teaching, and case-based communication. You do not need to shout. You just need to remove the ambiguity. Ambiguity pushes people back towards safer, more familiar options. When clients, employers, and collaborators look at you, they are desperately searching for reasons to trust you. Clear communication lowers the cost of choosing you. It reduces their uncertainty. This is the core strategy of making your signal smart. You are translating your raw competence into a highly readable format. The architecture of legibility. To make your signal smart, you must first clarify exactly what kind of expertise you want to be known for. A clear message always begins with a clear domain. Broad vagueness destroys trust. If you tell the market you are a general problem solver who can do a little bit of everything, the market will hire you for nothing. You must define your target. Choose the specific market, the specific audience, or the specific role you want to influence. Define exactly what they most need to believe about you in order to hand you the opportunity. This stops you from broadcasting randomly into the void. Once you have your target, you must build a core positioning sentence. This is not a clever elevator pitch. It is a brutal, stripped-down declaration of your utility. You state exactly who you help. You state exactly what problem you solve. You state exactly what kind of result you help create. You keep it simple enough to repeat often, and you repeat it until the market associates your name with that specific solution. People remember problem solvers. They instantly forget generic lists of positive traits. Relevance is the only thing that makes your message stick. With your core sentence built, you must strengthen every visible surface you present to the world. Your bio, your profile headline, your introduction, your proof links, and your testimonials must all align. Each surface must communicate your competence in 3 seconds or less. You need strong headlines that arrest attention. You need outcome-focused introductions that immediately prove your worth. You need sharp summaries that cut out the fluff. If a stranger looks at your profile and cannot figure out what you do and why it matters within 5 seconds, your signal has failed. The Trust Transfer Protocol. Even with a perfect message, cold persuasion is incredibly difficult. You are asking strangers to take a risk on you. To bypass this resistance, you must learn how to borrow trust ethically. You do this through the trust ladder. You start with the people who already know your work intimately. You ask them for highly specific referrals or endorsements. You do not ask for generic praise. You ask them to validate the exact problem you solved and the exact result you delivered. You then use those trust bridges to reach warmer opportunities. You collaborate with respected people in your field. You contribute massive value to credible communities. You let your work be seen in environments that already command respect. When you stand next to a trusted entity, their credibility bleeds onto you. This is trust transfer. It turns your isolated pieces of evidence into broad, undeniable reputation capital. But you must be careful here. Many people try to manufacture trust by collecting endless micro-credentials. They think one more minor certification will finally solve their trust problem. Some certifications can clarify your skill and open a specific door, but many of them are just low-value noise. The point is utility, not decoration. If you collect credentials just to feel safer, you are wasting time and reinforcing your own insecurity. Your stack of badges grows, but your clarity does not. Test every single credential against one ruthless question. Will this materially improve my trust, my access, or my proof in the eyes of my specific target audience? If the answer is no, drop it and get back to the real work. The mechanics of high-fidelity communication. There are specific mechanical adjustments you can make right now to drastically increase the power of your message. The first adjustment is to put your outcomes as close to your name as humanly possible. People should quickly understand what changes in the real world when you are involved. Outcomes create credibility infinitely faster than adjectives. Replace the word passionate with the phrase helped achieve. Replace the word driven with the exact percentage of growth you generated. Specificity always beats generic claims. Concrete details always beat abstract theories. Saying you improved client retention by 18% over 6 months is a lethal strike of competence. Saying you are a dedicated professional who cares about customer success is invisible corporate noise. You must also learn to completely control your first sentence. The first sentence you speak or write frames how people interpret every single thing that follows. If you lead with an apology, they will view your entire presentation through the lens of deficiency. If you lead with a disclaimer about your unconventional background, they will actively look for your flaws. You must never lead with an apology. You must always lead with your usefulness. You drop them straight into the value you provide. To understand how powerful this is, look at the masters of public translation. Arnold Schwarzenegger repeatedly repositioned himself across entirely different domains, moving from bodybuilding to film to global politics. He did not do this by accident. He did this by repeatedly building new competence and then broadcasting incredibly clear, unmistakable signals to his new audience. Oprah Winfrey turned raw communication skill into an empire of public authority. She did not wait for a traditional news anchor credential. She built a direct, undeniable signal that resonated with millions. Their examples prove that authority grows exponentially when raw talent and signal clarity reinforce each other. The inevitable amplification. When you align your proof with a high-fidelity signal, the market response changes overnight. The good outcomes are immediate. People understand much faster what you do and why it actually matters. Your hard-earned proof becomes incredibly easy for them to appreciate. You completely reduce the awkward confusion in your introductions, your applications, and your daily conversations. You stop feeling like you are speaking a foreign language. Then, the excellent outcomes arrive. Warm opportunities begin to flow toward you through referrals and reputation. Decision-makers trust you faster because your signals are perfectly aligned with your evidence. You spend drastically less time over-explaining your value and defending your background. The friction disappears. Finally, you reach the best outcomes. Your actual name begins to function as a trust signal inside your niche. You become the easiest person to recommend, the easiest person to hire, and the easiest person to remember. Formal credentials become entirely secondary because your market signal is already deafening. You have translated your private competence into a public monopoly. The traps of the broadcaster. As you turn up the volume on your career, you will face new dangers. The first trap is over-signaling. If you push too hard, you begin to sound self-absorbed and desperate. This repels trust instead of building it. People will feel they are being sold a slick image instead of actual value. You fix this by always leading with usefulness, concrete proof, and genuine service to your audience. Make it about the problem you solve for them, not how brilliant you are. The second trap is allowing your signals to become vague or inconsistent over time. If different people leave a conversation with completely different impressions of what you actually do, your credibility dies. Confusion is the enemy of momentum. You fix this by ruthlessly repeating your one clear positioning statement across every single visible surface you control. Repetition builds the reputation. The final trap is hiding behind your content and avoiding real human relationships. You can publish brilliant insights every day, but visibility alone does not replace the power of trust transfer. Isolation will eventually slow your momentum. You fix this by combining your public proof with direct networking, warm referrals, and strategic collaboration. You must step out from behind the screen and look the market in the eye. You now have the complete external arsenal. You know how to build the physical proof of your competence. You know how to translate that proof into a signal that cuts through the noise and forces the market to pay attention. The world is finally looking at you. The gatekeepers have stepped aside. The opportunity is sitting right in front of you, waiting for you to claim it. But as you reach out to take what you have earned, a familiar shadow falls over your mind. The external systems are no longer blocking you, but your internal architecture is trembling. What happens when the room goes quiet? All eyes turn to you, and your own nervous system screams that you do not belong. The final battle is not against the market. The final battle is against the ghost in your own machine. Chapter 7: The Private Standard. You have built the proof. You have mastered the signals. You have rewritten your introduction to eliminate every trace of apology. You walk into the high-stakes meeting armed with undeniable evidence of your competence. The presentation is flawless. The room is nodding. And then, the executive across the table casually mentions their time at an elite university. In a fraction of a second, your entire psychological structure collapses. Your throat tightens. Your voice drops an octave. You suddenly feel like a child wearing your parents' clothes. Why does this happen? Why does your confidence shatter despite holding a mountain of physical proof? It happens because external winds do not automatically rewrite internal beliefs. You have changed your armor, but you have not changed the soldier wearing it. This chapter is the psychological core of your transformation. We are going to rip out the faulty wiring that makes you collapse around prestige, and we are going to install a private standard that holds firm under maximum pressure. You are about to learn how to convert your external evidence into unshakable internal authority. The fragility of borrowed confidence. External proof without internal authority creates a dangerously unstable existence. You can secure massive wins and still feel incredibly small. You can receive standing ovations and still doubt yourself the very next morning. This happens because if the old belief survives, new evidence simply gets discounted by your brain. Your mind acts like a corrupt judge, throwing out every piece of evidence that contradicts its core belief that you do not belong. Internal authority is the only thing that protects your performance under pressure. Pressure is a truth serum. It reveals what your identity actually trusts. When the stakes are low, you can fake confidence. But when the stakes are high, when the room is hostile, and when the gatekeepers are staring you down, a weak identity will always fold. A strong private standard keeps you completely steady in public tests. Without that standard, prestige cues will hijack your behavior every single time. You will hand over your power to anyone holding a shiny piece of paper. You must understand that the goal here is not emotional perfection. The goal is functional stability. You may still feel nerves before a massive pitch. Your heart might still race. The win is not eliminating the nerves. The win is refusing to obey those nerves blindly. Stable self-command matters infinitely more than constant comfort. You do not need to feel like a superhero. You just need to operate from a foundation of cold, hard facts. The architecture of self-trust. To build this foundation, you must first find exactly where the legitimacy wound was installed. You were not born feeling like a fraud. This was a learned behavior. It usually traces back to early schooling experiences, to authority figures who explicitly equated your grades with your human worth, or to social moments where superficial labels completely outranked actual capability. You must drag these memories into the light. Once you see the wound, you must begin rebuilding trust in your own evidence. You do this by using your actual results as anchors. You use your history of repeated problem-solving as undeniable proof of your capability. You must start using your memory intentionally instead of letting your insecurity edit the story. Right now, your brain only remembers your failures and your awkward moments. You have to force it to remember your victories. This is the final transition from borrowed legitimacy to owned legitimacy. Borrowed legitimacy constantly asks the room, "Who approved me?" Owned legitimacy looks at the problem and asks, "What can I reliably do, explain, and improve?" This is the ultimate shift from childlike dependence to adult self-command. When you lock this in, you develop a calm, lethal authority in status-heavy environments. Meetings, interviews, negotiations, and professional introductions stop feeling like Judgment Day. They simply become arenas where you deploy your competence. The fantasies of the insecure mind. You must abandon the myths that are keeping your internal authority weak. The first myth is the belief that once you get enough external validation, you will finally feel secure. Validation helps, but it fades almost instantly. The nervous system adapts to praise and immediately asks for more. Without inner integration, praise just becomes a short-term stimulant. You cannot build a career on sugar highs. The second myth is that one massive heroic success will fix your insecurity forever. It will not. One giant success can easily be dismissed as a fluke by a mind trained to discount itself. Lasting authority usually comes from repeated, boring evidence, not one dramatic event. Consistency beats isolated spikes every single time. The third myth is the aggressive idea that you need to completely stop caring what other people think. Human beings are social creatures. Total detachment is a sociopathic fantasy, and it is entirely unrealistic. The real goal is not total indifference, but proper proportion. Other people's views should inform your strategy, but they must never rule your identity. The final myth is that true internal authority means never feeling a single ounce of doubt. Doubt can still appear. The difference between an amateur and a master is how quickly they recover and what standard they return to when the doubt hits. Authority is measured by your response to pressure, not by the magical absence of human emotion. The installation audit. We are going to rewire your responses right now. You must run the installation audit. Sit down and identify the very first memory where you felt your learning or your capability did not count because it lacked an official stamp. Name the exact person or the exact institution that taught you that toxic lesson. Write down the specific meaning you attached to that event. This high-level exercise works by turning invisible, subconscious conditioning into visible material that you can logically challenge and destroy. Next, you must deploy the container versus content test in live moments. When the panic hits you in a meeting, ask yourself if the doubt is about the actual quality of your knowledge or merely the status of its source. If the source is the issue, immediately return your focus to your evidence. This simple question violently interrupts your automatic submission to prestige. You must also build an evidence journal. This is not a diary of your feelings. This is a ledger of your competence. Record specific moments where your knowledge produced a highly useful result in the real world. Include exactly what happened, what specific action you took, and why it mattered financially or operationally. Review this ledger regularly, especially after you encounter a legitimacy trigger. This high-level exercise trains your mind to store proof instead of only storing threat. You must rehearse your authority under pressure. Prepare a clean, unapologetic answer for questions about your background. Practice stating your unconventional path without a single drop of apology. Practice naming your results in simple, brutal language. Rehearsal matters immensely because pressure narrows your access to clear thinking. When the adrenaline hits, you will default to your highest level of preparation. Finally, you must use recovery protocols after status triggers. When someone drops a prestige cue and you feel yourself shrinking, execute this sequence. Pause. Name the trigger in your own mind. Recall one highly relevant piece of evidence from your journal. Then speak or act entirely from that evidence, not from the fear. This simple sequence retrains your behavior in the exact moment it usually collapses. The mechanics of composure. To maintain this composure, you must keep your proof visible to yourself. Memory is highly biased under stress. When you are intimidated, your brain will convince you that you have never succeeded at anything in your life. Easy access to real evidence helps your correction happen much faster. Keep a short list of undeniable wins on your desk or in your phone. Do not keep a vague folder of compliments. Keep a list of hard facts. You must also learn to separate discomfort from danger. A room full of heavy hitters can feel threatening even when you are perfectly prepared. Feeling pressure in your chest is not the same thing as being exposed as incapable. Learn to let your body be activated without obeying the activation. Your heart can race while your voice remains completely steady. Use clear, low-drama self-talk. Do not look in the mirror and scream that you are the greatest in the world. That is loud fantasy, and your brain will reject it. Use calm truth. Tell yourself that you know this material, you have used it in the real world, and you can explain it clearly. Calm truth beats loud fantasy every time. Study the famous figures who possess terrifying internal authority. Abraham Lincoln developed massive intellectual force through disciplined self-trust, refusing to let the highly educated elites of his time diminish his self-directed brilliance. Oprah Winfrey built unmistakable authority through her voice, her consistency, and her earned presence, never apologizing for her background. Nelson Mandela proved that inner authority can outlast the most brutal external attempts to diminish it. They drew their power from within, making them completely immune to the labels of the outside world. The portable fortress. When you build this private standard, the outcomes are profound. The good outcomes happen first. You recover much faster after feeling intimidated. You become far less dependent on praise to feel solid. You completely stop automatically discounting your own evidence. The bleeding stops. Then, the excellent outcomes arrive. You can speak in high-status environments with absolute steadiness. Your confidence becomes less emotional and entirely evidence-based. You trust your deep preparation infinitely more than your passing mood. You become a dangerous operator because you no longer need the room to validate you before you strike. Ultimately, you achieve the best outcomes. You completely stop shrinking around credentials. You build a private standard that is strong enough to hold under maximum social pressure. Your authority becomes entirely portable. It works across different rooms, different titles, and rapidly changing circumstances. You carry your fortress with you. The traps of the mind. You must guard against the traps that will try to pull you back into weakness. Do not try to feel confident before acting. This creates massive delays and strengthens your avoidance. Action then becomes dependent on your mood. You fix this by acting strictly from your evidence and your preparation, never waiting for perfect feelings. Do not let your evidence journal become vague. Generic positivity does not persuade a stressed mind. You need hard specifics that your mind cannot easily dismiss. You fix this by recording concrete actions, measurable outcomes, and observed effects. Do not turn your inner authority into stubbornness. Real authority still listens, adapts, and updates its models. Refusing correction is just insecurity wearing heavy armor. You fix this by staying evidence-led and remaining completely open to real, constructive feedback. Finally, do not use insight as a substitute for exposure. Thinking about confidence in your bedroom is not the same as practicing it under pressure in a boardroom. Without real tests, your authority remains entirely theoretical. You fix this by deliberately entering rooms where you must use your voice and deploy your proof. You have now built the internal architecture. You have the proof, you have the signal, and you have the unshakable private standard to back it all up. You are ready to dominate the current market. But the market is not standing still. The rules of the game are changing faster than ever before. The credentials that gatekeepers worship today are rapidly losing their value. A massive technological shift is completely rewriting the economics of expertise. If you stop here, you will win today, but you will be obsolete tomorrow. You are about to learn how to turn your self-directed nature into the ultimate unfair advantage in a world that is accelerating beyond human comprehension. Chapter 8, Future Proof. You are standing on a massive fault line. The ground beneath your feet is shifting violently, and the gatekeepers who once demanded your absolute obedience are currently panicking because the gates they guard are rusting away. You have spent this entire journey learning how to beat the credential machine as it exists today. You have built the proof, you have mastered the signals, and you have forged an unshakable internal standard. But the rules of the global economy are being rewritten in real time. The market is changing infinitely faster than the old authority systems can adapt. If you stop here, you will win today, but you will be completely obsolete tomorrow. This chapter expands your frame from current confidence to permanent, long-term advantage. We are going to slowly unpack what it actually means to make your career immune to obsolescence. You are about to discover how self-directed learners can thrive in a brutal world where knowledge changes fast, where technology accelerates learning, and where rigid credentials become less useful with every passing second. You are about to become a dangerous, highly adaptive operator. The expiration date of prestige. The fundamental problem with the traditional authority system is that it assumes knowledge is static. It assumes that once you receive a stamp of approval, you are permanently qualified for the rest of your life. This is a lethal delusion. In the modern arena, skills expire, tools evolve, paradigms shift overnight. Static credentials do not automatically keep pace with the bleeding edge of reality. A degree from 10 years ago is simply a receipt for an expired product. The market does not care what you knew a decade ago. The market only cares what you can execute this afternoon. This reality gives birth to the concept of post-credential authority. Authority increasingly comes from rapid adaptation, visible output, and trusted judgment in the face of the unknown. The value of a past credential actively declines if the holder stops updating their mental models. The person who leans on an old title while refusing to learn the new landscape will be destroyed by the person who possesses 0 formal titles but possesses a relentless drive to adapt. The self-directed learner wins by staying current and staying useful. When the environment changes, the institutionally trained operator waits for the institution to issue a new syllabus. The self-directed operator simply builds their own syllabus and conquers the new territory before the institution even realizes the map has changed. The velocity advantage. It is no longer about what you know right now. It is entirely about how fast you can absorb the next paradigm. Learning speed is becoming the ultimate, undeniable competitive advantage in the modern economy. The mathematics of this advantage are brutal and simple. The person who learns faster can adapt faster. The person who adapts faster can create physical proof sooner. The person who creates proof sooner captures the trust of the market sooner. Velocity is the weapon that slaughters pedigree. To wield this weapon, you must build compounding learning loops. The cycle is always the same. You learn a new concept. You apply it immediately to a real problem. You document the result of that application. You refine your approach based on the feedback of reality, and then you repeat the cycle. This aggressive, continuous loop matters infinitely more than the passive accumulation of facts. Passive accumulation makes you a trivia champion. Compounding learning loops make you an apex predator in your industry. You stop treating learning as a random hobby, and you start treating it as a strategic engine for your career. The frictionless engine. We must now address the technological elephant in the room. Artificial intelligence is completely changing the economics of self-education. This is not a technical chapter for software engineers. This is a strategic reality for anyone who wants to survive. In the past, self-directed learning was incredibly lonely and full of massive friction. If you hit a wall, you stayed stuck for days. Artificial intelligence destroys that friction. It lowers the cost of explanation. It lowers the cost of feedback. It lowers the cost of structured practice. This makes self-directed learning exponentially more powerful than it has ever been in human history. You must use this technology as a learning accelerator. It can explain complex concepts at beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels of depth on command. It can help identify the invisible gaps in your understanding. It can generate brutal practice scenarios, challenging prompts, and immediate refinements. It can support faster iteration on your public proof. When learning speed rises and proof becomes drastically easier to create, ownership completely beats dependency. You no longer have an excuse for staying stuck. You have the greatest tutor in the history of the world sitting in your pocket, waiting for your command. The illusions of the static mind. To harness this velocity, you must abandon the comforting myths that keep average people paralyzed. The first myth is the desperate hope that once you catch up, you can finally relax. In fast-moving fields, there is no permanent catch-up point. There is no finish line where you get to sit down and rest. Stagnation quickly erodes your confidence and your relevance. The real advantage is not reaching a destination, but staying permanently adaptive. The second myth is the terrified belief that artificial intelligence makes human expertise worthless. This is the excuse of the coward. This technology increases access to raw information, but it does not replace human judgment, taste, prioritization, or responsibility. People who use these tools well will become infinitely more effective, not less necessary. The market will always pay a premium for the human being who takes ultimate responsibility for the final outcome. The third myth is the naive assumption that formal systems will keep you current. Institutions update unevenly and incredibly slowly. Real-world demands always move faster than academic curricula. Self-direction remains absolutely essential, even for the most formally trained people on Earth. If you wait for the corporation or the university to update your skills, you will starve. The final myth is the dangerous idea that more information equals more mastery. Faster access to information can actually create faster confusion. Without ruthless selection and immediate application, learning just turns into deafening noise. Velocity only helps you when it is directed at a specific, high-value target. The strategic blueprint. You must execute a precise blueprint to future-proof your career. You begin by building a strategic learning map. You choose one high-value domain that the market is desperately demanding. You break that massive domain down into manageable subskills. You then rank those subskills by relevance, urgency, and their potential to generate immediate public proof. This high-level exercise keeps your learning strictly aligned with financial and operational outcomes. You stop wandering and you start hunting. You then use your technological tools to reduce friction, not to replace your own thinking. You ask the machine for counter-arguments and blind spots. You ask it to challenge your assumptions. You use the output as a sparring partner, not as a final authority. You run short, violent learning sprints. You pick one clear skill. You study it intensely. You apply it to a real problem in your business or your career. You document the result. You reflect on what still feels weak, and then you move to the next sprint. This method turns learning into forward movement rather than intellectual hoarding. You must build a proof on contact habit. Every single learning cycle should create some visible trace in the real world. That trace can be a short note, a case example, a new framework, or a solved problem. This prevents endless private consumption. You learn in public-sized pieces. Small outputs lower your psychological resistance, but they still build undeniable proof. Those small outputs compound over time into a massive body of work. As you do this, you must protect your depth while increasing your speed. Fast does not mean shallow. You must repeat key concepts across entirely different contexts. You must test your understanding by explanation and application, not by recognition alone. You must watch out for the fluency illusion. Understanding something when a machine explains it to you is not the same thing as being able to use it under pressure. Passive familiarity creates false confidence. Force yourself to produce, to teach, and to solve. If you want to see the ultimate manifestation of this strategy, study the people who kept reinventing themselves across multiple decades. Arnold Schwarzenegger repeatedly repositioned himself across the entirely different domains of professional bodybuilding, global cinema, and high-level politics. He did not do this by relying on old credentials. He did this by repeatedly building new competence, mastering new rules, and broadcasting new signals to the market. Elon Musk became a historical force by learning across the vastly different industries of digital payments, aerospace engineering, and automotive manufacturing, applying his knowledge aggressively and publicly. Their stories prove that the market ruthlessly rewards learning velocity and execution. Reinvention is the ultimate proof of authority. The inevitable edge and the hidden traps. When you internalize this velocity, the outcomes are spectacular. The good outcomes appear first. You learn with drastically less confusion and much more structure. You stop treating your education as a random, passive event. You create significantly more visible proof from the exact same amount of effort. Then, the excellent outcomes arrive. You become infinitely more adaptive than your peers who are still relying on their older, decaying signals. You update your knowledge faster, and you apply it sooner. You turn technological acceleration into a massive leverage tool rather than a source of distraction and fear. You surf the wave while everyone else drowns in it. Ultimately, you achieve the best outcomes. Your sheer ability to learn quickly becomes a core part of your public authority. You stay highly relevant while slower, more credentialed competitors fade into obscurity. You build a long-term, bulletproof reputation as someone who can absorb massive change, process the chaos, and turn it into undeniable results. But this high-speed environment contains hidden traps that will destroy you if you lose focus. The first problem is using your new tools to consume more information but apply less. This creates the illusion of speed without any real gain. Your knowledge feels broader, but your actual capability is not getting any stronger. You fix this by tying every single learning session to a physical output, a hard decision, or a solved problem. The second problem is chasing too many skills at once. Scattered effort destroys your depth. Weak depth produces weak proof. You fix this by ruthlessly sequencing your skills and choosing only one priority domain at a time. Focus is a weapon. The third problem is mistaking tool use for mastery. Access to smart tools can create a massive surge of false confidence. You think you are a genius because the machine gave you a brilliant answer. Real mastery still requires your judgment, your taste, and your physical application in the real world. You fix this by testing yourself constantly through unassisted explanation, raw action, and visible outcomes. The final problem is moving too fast to consolidate your learning. Unconsolidated knowledge decays incredibly quickly. Surface-level familiarity cannot support your authority when the pressure rises and the room demands real answers. You fix this by revisiting your key ideas, applying them repeatedly in different scenarios, and documenting exactly what changed in your approach. You have now built the ultimate engine. You have the physical proof to silence the gatekeepers. You have the sharp signals to capture the attention of the market. You have the private standard to protect your mind from prestige shock. And you have the velocity to ensure you never become obsolete. You are a dangerous, self-directed operator, fully equipped to dominate a world that changes by the hour. But having the weapons is not the same thing as living the philosophy. There is one final integration required, a massive shift that moves beyond your career, beyond your portfolio, and beyond your learning speed. This final shift will completely alter how you speak, how you negotiate, and how you relate to every single human being in your life. You are about to discover what happens when this entire system stops being a strategy you use and finally becomes the person you are. Chapter 9. Earned Authority. You have reached the end of the blueprint. You have dismantled the machine. You have seen the ghost in your own programming, and you have dragged it out into the unforgiving light. But reading a strategy is not the same thing as living it. The knowledge you hold right now is completely useless if it remains locked inside your head as a theoretical concept. This final chapter is where the framework dies and your new life stance begins. We are going to integrate every single weapon you have acquired. You are going to leave this page with a cold, undeniable clarity about who you are, what you are capable of, and the exact physical move you must make the second you close this book. You are about to step out of the waiting room and walk permanently into the arena. The death of the Phantom Rulebook. Let us look back at the battlefield you just crossed. You now understand that credentials are not worthless, but they are absolutely not the whole game. Degrees are simply market signals. They are probability hints used by busy people. Institutions can provide a helpful foundation, but they do not hold a monopoly on human competence. You have learned to treat credentials with cold realism rather than religious worship. You respect the signal, but you no longer surrender your spine to it. You also know the name of your real enemy. The deepest problem destroying your momentum was never a lack of intelligence, a lack of potential, or a lack of drive. The enemy was the legitimacy trap. It was the deeply installed toxic belief that your learning did not count unless a gatekeeper stamped it with their approval. Naming that enemy was your first massive victory. You separated your actual skill gaps from your conditioned panic, and in doing so, you stripped the trap of its power. The path out of that trap required 3 ruthless moves. You had to build undeniable physical proof, You had to translate that proof into a razor-sharp signal that the market could instantly read, and you had to build an internal standard of authority so your confidence stopped collapsing every time someone flashed a fancy title in your face. You learned that self-direction is not a backup plan. It is the ultimate long-game advantage. The world changes, skills expire, and industries pivot overnight. The person who can direct their own growth, adapt to the chaos, and generate new proof on command is the person who keeps gaining ground while the credentialed masses wait for instructions. The posture of the sovereign mind. The knowledge you have gained in this system gives you an entirely new way to see yourself. You are no longer a lesser substitute version of the institutionally trained. You are a highly capable operator who chooses their own learning, generates visible value, and commands earned authority. This new identity dictates your action. You no longer walk into a room hoping they will overlook your background. You walk into the room knowing your background is the exact reason you can solve their bleeding problem. You now possess a lethal strategic framework for credibility. You know exactly how to diagnose false fraud feelings the second they appear in your chest. You know how to use the container versus content test to override your panic. You know how to create physical evidence out of thin air, and you know how to make that evidence highly legible to a distracted world. You are no longer guessing at how to build trust. You are engineering it. This gives you a profoundly cleaner emotional footing. The blind panic you used to feel around titles and prestige has evaporated. Your desperate dependence on the applause of strangers has been replaced by a quiet reliance on your own documented results. You operate with a terrifying calm under pressure. This calm gives you massive leverage in real-world arenas. Interviews are no longer interrogations where you beg for a job. They are peer-to-peer conversations where you evaluate a mutual fit. Pitches, networking events, leadership moments, and career transitions all become simple exercises in deploying your proof. The collapse of the status trial. This transformation extends far beyond your career. Owning your expertise fundamentally alters how you speak, how you connect, and how you relate to every single human being in your life. When you lack internal authority, your insecurity distorts all of your communication. You turn every interaction into a hidden status trial. You constantly scan the room to see who is judging you, who is ranking you, and who is dismissing you. This makes you exhausted, and it makes you incredibly difficult to trust. Internal authority destroys this defensiveness. When you no longer need every single conversation to validate your existence, you become infinitely easier to talk to. Calm people connect better. People can feel your self-respect radiating from you, and it makes them feel safe in your presence. You stop performing your insecurity through frantic over-explaining or tragic self-erasure. You speak directly. You listen deeply, without that agonizing, secret comparison running in the background of your mind. This clearer self-respect drastically improves your professional relationships. Colleagues instinctively trust people who communicate from a place of grounded evidence rather than a place of desperate ego. Clients trust people who are clear, direct, and completely devoid of neediness. Mentors and high-level operators respond to your quiet seriousness far better than they respond to status worship. Healthier confidence completely removes your envy and your hidden resentment. You can finally respect true experts without shrinking before them. You can admire the massive success of others without feeling personally diminished by it. Your relationships become clean, mature, and incredibly powerful. The new physics of your reality. Because of this shift, you are now capable of executing moves that were completely impossible for you a month ago. You can introduce yourself to a room of heavy hitters without a single reflexive apology. You can state exactly what you know. You can state exactly what you solve. You can do both of these things without ever leading with what you lack. You control the first sentence, and you control the frame. You can enter high-status rooms with absolute composure. You no longer view a boardroom as a judgment day tribunal. You view it as a simple marketplace of problems and solutions. Professional conversations become intensely task-focused and completely non-threatening to your identity. If someone challenges your idea, you defend the idea with evidence. You do not internalize the challenge as an attack on your right to exist. You can convert your learning into leverage with ruthless efficiency. You know how to turn your raw skill into physical proof. You know how to turn that physical proof into market trust. You know how to stop letting your brilliant, invisible skill die in the dark. You make decisions from a foundation of evidence instead of a foundation of insecurity. You choose better, more lucrative markets. You pursue massive opportunities you once actively avoided. You completely stop chasing empty validation, and you start chasing aligned, explosive growth. The momentum of the heavy flywheel. The most beautiful part of this entire system is that it requires less and less effort the longer you practice it. You are pushing a massive, heavy flywheel. The first few pushes require every ounce of strength in your body. But as the wheel begins to turn, momentum takes over. The physics of compounding work in your favor. Your proof compounds. The first artifact you build will feel incredibly difficult. You will overthink it. You will doubt it. But the 10th artifact will flow out of you like a natural reflex. Over time, you build a massive body of work that carries the burden of trust for you. You no longer have to persuade people to believe you. Your archive does the persuading while you sleep. Your signaling compounds. A clear, sharp reputation drastically reduces the need to reintroduce yourself from scratch every time you enter a new room. Referrals become effortless because people know exactly how to describe your value to others. Warm trust lowers the friction of every single transaction in your career. Your self-trust compounds. Repeated exposure to your own evidence shortens your recovery time after a doubt spike. When the imposter feeling hits, it no longer ruins your week. It barely ruins your minute. Old triggers completely lose their force. Confidence becomes automatic because it is anchored in deep memory and undeniable pattern recognition. Your learning compounds. Each new skill you acquire becomes easier to attach to your existing framework. Each learning cycle strengthens your judgment. Each result feeds the next proof cycle, creating an engine of perpetual growth. Ultimately, your authority becomes completely effortless because it ceases to be a strategy and simply becomes your identity. At first, you must consciously remember the framework. You must actively fight the old beliefs. But later, the framework becomes the only way you know how to think. The work gets cleaner, the mind gets calmer, and the execution gets infinitely faster. The immediate strike. You are not going to close this book and simply feel inspired. Inspiration is a cheap emotion that evaporates the second you face resistance. You are going to take immediate physical action. You're going to lock this transformation into reality right now. First, you will write your one-sentence authority statement. You will state the specific domain you understand. You will state the exact problem you solve. You will state it without a single drop of apology, without a single disclaimer, and without a single shrinking word. You will write it down and you will memorize it. Second, you will list 3 undeniable pieces of evidence that support that exact statement. You will name a project you delivered. You will name a measurable result you generated. You will name a piece of direct feedback or peer validation you received from someone who saw you execute in the trenches. You will pull this evidence out of your memory and put it on the page. Third, you will turn one of those pieces of evidence into a visible proof asset within the next 24 hours. You will not wait until you feel ready. You will write a short case study. You will publish a post detailing your framework. You will create a portfolio entry, or you will simply rewrite your professional introduction and link it directly to your past work. You will force your competence into the physical world before the sun sets tomorrow. Finally, you will schedule your next learning and proof cycle. You will choose one highly relevant skill to deepen. You will choose one specific way to apply it to a real problem. You will choose one concrete way to document the result. You will start the engine, and you will never let it stop. The arena awaits. You have spent years waiting for a life to begin after permission finally arrives. You have waited for a letter, a certificate, a nod from a gatekeeper, or a magical moment where you finally feel like you are allowed to be powerful. That moment is never coming. The gatekeepers are too busy protecting their own fragile status to ever hand you the keys. But you do not need their keys. You are already in the arena. You have already paid the price of admission in time, in brutal effort, in painful mistakes, and in silent discipline. That massive investment counts. It has always counted. The room does not need your apology. The market does not care about your insecurities. The world is desperate for your clarity. It is starving for your proof. It needs your absolute willingness to stand firmly in what you know and deliver the solutions you have built. Stop shrinking around symbols. Respect true competence wherever you find it. Respect relentless excellence, but never again worship a label. Own the unconventional path you chose. Own the brutal work you did in the dark. Own the spectacular results you created when no one was watching. Own the expertise you earned with your own two hands. Move right now. Build one thing. Share one thing. Say one clean, devastating sentence about exactly what you do. The trap gets weaker the exact moment you act like your learning counts, because it does. The illusion is shattered. The gates are open. The authority is yours. Now go claim your territory.